Hi, everybody, and welcome to Big Joe's Journal. My name is Joe Tilden. I'm the host of this program. Well, we're taping this program on the 1st of March. And of course, what that means, the 2nd of March is a big demonstration of basic democracy, and that is town meeting day. And of course, town meeting day this year is going to be quite a bit different. A number of towns have postponed their meetings till the end of May, first part of June. Some are going to do it through the use of Zoom, but it's an entirely different setup thanks to COVID-19. The late Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, he was from Boston, congressman from Boston, and he always said that politics is local. And by that he meant that if you're going to get started, you go to ground, you got to win on local territory, first of all, your local town elections or city elections. And here in Vermont, we have it on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in the month of March. New Hampshire will be next week. And the weather forecast for this year does not sound good. We've got a fairly mild day today, but things are going to get colder, and they're supposed to be bitter cold. That cold wave is going to hit us just right tomorrow, and temperatures and wind chill is going to be way, way down. So for towns that are going to have their meeting on Tuesday in person, I would imagine the attendance will probably be down as people, well, for one thing, maybe their cars won't start. Might be too cold to get in there at 9 o'clock in the morning. The ones you got to take your hat off to are the poll workers, say like in the city of Rutland, Burlington, where you go to the polls and vote or vote absentee, because they're going to be coming out when this wind chill factor is at its, I'll say lowest. I won't say best, I'll say lowest. So you got to give them a lot of credit. You're going to be putting in some long days tomorrow. And this is something I think we look forward to year-round. The legislature has the week off, and many of your legislators will be hanging out at the polls, maybe, unless it gets too cold for them. And it's a great Vermont tradition, but it's also an American tradition. And of course, your town meeting, of course, all votes are taken from the floor. On the other hand, in the larger communities where you go to the polls, it's your regular way of voting. One of the things that is going to take hold, I think, because of this COVID-19, that'll be voting by mail or voting by absentee. Certainly, it's a lot easier if you got the ballot that comes to your home. You sit down, it gives you time to go through them and check them out and see who you want to vote for and go from there. Now, here in the city of Rutland, we've got a large number of candidates running. And the reason for that is that because of the COVID-19, you didn't have to get any signatures this year. Previous years, you want to run for public office, you had to have a petition and you had to get signatures. I know the 2 times I ran for the state senate, you had to have 100 signatures from around the county. First time I ran for the Board of Aldermen, it was 50 signatures. And the last time I ran, it was 37. Our population had decreased that much, so the number of votes you had to have, a certain percentage of the voters in the community, it was 37. But this year, because of the COVID-19 thing, the idea of getting signatures was waived. And for that reason, we've got a huge number of candidates running. Got 7 people running for mayor. I think the largest number we had before was when John Castorino stepped down, and we had 5, maybe 6 people running. But you got 7 seeking the office of mayor. Got 8 or 17 running for the Board of Aldermen. And sometimes running for the Board of Aldermen, you might only have 6 or 7 or 8. Once in a while, you got a good year, you'll have 11 or 12 running. But 17, that's got to be a record. And I think you can kick it all back to the fact that you didn't have to go out and get signatures. The same thing with the number of charitable organizations that'll be on the ballot. The expense for them will be above the charter limit. And they likewise, the requirement that they get signatures to get on the ballot was waived, and they had to be approved by the board. So, number of items on the board, and number of candidates. In a way, having 17 candidates running for the Board of Aldermen, it kind of hurts your chances of running, especially if you're down alphabetically and you're down toward the end. A lot of people are going to bang, bang, bang the first 6, and that's it. And you go from there, and if you're down toward the end of the alphabet, you've got an uphill fight. Especially this year when you couldn't get out and do door-to-door campaigning, or I don't know how many beeping waves there were. I didn't get out that much. Get around and see who's standing on the corner waving to traffic as you go by. But the beeping wave used to be a popular thing. Get together, and especially with the November elections, beeping wave used to be very popular because you get together with your fellow candidates and you're staying there waving at the motors as they go by. Some of them will honk their horn in support, and others will flip you the bird. And it was a very, very interesting feature of campaigning. But things are entirely different, and I think they're going to stay that way for a while. I think one of the things that are going to come in and be a permanent fixture, it's going to be voting by mail. As you know, the last presidential election, it was a huge, huge turnout. And that can be attributed to a number of things. First of all, a number of people turned out, they wanted to get rid of the incumbent. And number two, it was made easy by being allowed to vote by mail. And a lot of people elected to do it that way. And I would think in the future, probably this will continue. Being able to vote absentee or vote by mail. But the polls will always be open for those who want to go to the polls. Usually when the weather's good, it's a great way to get together and meet folks you haven't seen for a while and shake their hand. Or folks here in Vermont, it's a chance to meet your local legislator. Ask them what they're doing and what they're not doing and how they're representing you and so forth. For town meeting, usually it's a community celebration. Have their meeting, do their business, and then have a large lunch or dinner or whatever. And then in the afternoon, go back and finish up what they didn't get done in the morning. And in some places, this will take place, but not the great number of where it used to be, or where it would be if times were normal. As we know, times now are not normal. Well, there's a big push on to reopen schools and see if we can't get in a few months before the end of the school year. But this is a situation that our leaders have got to take a very, very serious look at. And, you go 1 or 2 years, but students are they don't learn as well when they're sitting at home looking at a TV screen or a Zoom screen. The same effective learning does not take place. And right now there seems to be a big concern over mental problems with some of these kids. They miss their friends. They miss the socialization with their classmates and their buddies. And the basketball season, of course, is going to be rather short-lived. A number of teams have opted out and canceled their season. The women's basketball team at the University of Vermont, with a 6-4 record, canceled their season because of COVID-19 the number of ups and downs. So it's going to be, things are going to be entirely different. And I don't think anything's ever going to go back to normal. One of the things I have recommended, not that anybody listens to me, but the change in the school year, completely flip-flopping the school year, beginning in March, running through the summer, and ending right after Thanksgiving or just before Christmas. Because the method of teaching now is going to have to be changed. It won't be a case of sitting in a classroom, spending most of your time in a classroom. And the way teachers teach, it has already been changed, and they've had to use different methods and different approaches with the COVID-19 thing. But I think what we're going to have to do is go to a school year that begins in March and runs through till right after Thanksgiving. Because much of education now is going to have to take place outdoors. Field trips, which were a rarity, are going to become a commonplace thing. And there will be a classroom action, of course, but you won't be in the classroom, in most cases, 5 days a week. Maybe in the classroom 1 or 2, and then outside for the other 3. Now, toward the end of my teaching career, I was teaching driver ed. And of course, right now there isn't any driver ed because there's no way of getting that 6-foot distance between the driver and the instructor. But if that is going to come back, the best time to teach driver ed, of course, is in the summer. You don't have to deal with snow-covered roads or anything else. And it's a bit safer. I know I did, when you're teaching driver ed, you more or less worked year-round. You had your school year, and then you had a summer program for kids that couldn't take it during the school year because of their academic schedule. I also filled in at a lot of schools in the summer, right? My primary schools were Poltley and West Rutland. And I did a lot of summer programs at Spalding and Barry, for example. At Middlebury Union High School, at Bellows Free Academy in Fairfax, at Burton in Manchester, at Springfield. And of course, at Rutland, when I had spare time from West Rutland and Poltley, I assisted the program at Rutland High School during the year and also during the summer. So a number of schools over the years, of course, have had remedial programs in the summer for people that, for whatever reason, their grades weren't where they should have been or where they would like to have been. And they run special tutoring programs in the summer. Colleges have had summer programs for years. Mainly it was geared to teachers who wanted to improve their teaching ability or wanted to move up on the pay scale by, say, working toward a master's degree or, in some rare cases, a PhD in a particular subject area. So it's nothing new on that level. But I think it's going to have to become a commonplace. And we're going to have to think outside the box. We can't continue the way we are and expect our students, our kids, to have the best education possible. It just doesn't work that way. And it won't work that way. For example, a year ago, the school year came to an end in March for a lot of people. They went on Zoom and computers and everything else. But it's not the same as having that person-to-person relationship between the teacher and the student. It's the way education takes place. The idea of the teacher is not necessarily just to lecture. but it's to create an interest in the student that they're going to want to explore that subject further on their own. In other words, you fire up their curiosity. And if you present your subject matter in such a way that it fires up that curiosity, the student on their own is going to go ahead and make progress and search a little bit further. That is why one of the most important subjects that's taught at the elementary level is reading. Being able to read and being able to understand what you're reading. And of course, if you're very proficient at reading, this can open a lot of doors to you. You know, one of the smartest men ever to occupy the White House was Abraham Lincoln. But Abraham Lincoln never had a diploma, never had a degree. He got to be a lawyer by reading the law, passing the bar exam. And we had a recently retired a retired Associate Justice on our Vermont Supreme Court who worked as a legal secretary. And she read and studied the law on her own, and it was enough to pass the bar exam. And of course, she went up through the ranks and was appointed to the state Supreme Court. Abraham Lincoln educated himself by reading and doing studying on his own. Independent study is what it's called, but it can be done. But unfortunately, those that are capable of independent study are in a minority, which is why it is so important that we've got to take a look at how we're presenting our education. Where do we start? Well, we start in kindergarten, in some cases pre-kindergarten. And we develop an interest in reading, a love of reading. Reading is an adventure. It'll open doors to our students. And you go on from there. But the foundation, of course, has to be able to read and to comprehend and to understand what you're reading. And once the student can do that, everything's going to fall into place. If you get in the upper grades, they learn how to parse a sentence. In other words, your different cases as you break down a sentence. Your declarative, the verb, direct object, indirect object, adverbs, adjectives, which identify and clarify a noun. And you go from there. Our kids will learn a foreign language. Once you're able to break down a sentence and break down the various aspects of it, then it's easier when you get into studying foreign language, such as your romantic languages, like, well, let's take a dead language like Latin. You're able to break it down. As you know, the verb in Latin is the last word in the sentence. And you study your other languages, French, Spanish, Italian, German, so forth down the line. Now there's a big demand, of course, of Chinese being taught in a number of our schools. It's the minority that take Chinese, but it is there, and depending on how our world develops, it may become more and more and more important. But this is the reason why we've got to realize that our students aren't getting the full advantage of an education. When we get into the field of sports, well, we saw a situation where football last year here in Vermont, they had what they call 7-man football. And it's going to be an interesting trick when the Shrine Bowl comes along between Vermont and New Hampshire, where it'll be played at the first Saturday in August at David Walk Stadium over at Castleton University. New Hampshire's been playing 11-man football, Vermont's been playing 7. So can Vermont adapt back to the 11-man football style, which is what the Shrine Bowl will be? During our basketball season, it's going to be a shortened season. I believe the tournaments have all been pushed back till around the end of March. So they'll be able to get a few games in before then. And it appears that the Rutland High School might be the class of the state this year, the way they've been rolling over everybody. They haven't really tangled with any of the powers up north, so it remains to be seen how they would do on the overall state schedule. That brings us to another thing. For some of us old-timers, they're the Rutland Raiders, but they are now being known as the Rutland Ravens. And of course, the big discussion over the name change. Paper keeps calling it a mascot. It's not a mascot, it was a name. And many of the old grads and the old-timers here in Rutland, they wanted to keep the name of Raiders. For a while, they were the Red Raiders. Now, this name came in with a former football coach at Rutland named Dido Flates. And Dido was a graduate of Colgate University, and Colgate University was known and still are known as the Red Raiders. So when he came to Rutland, I'm not sure what they called Rutland High School at the time, but he wanted a name that fired him up more. And so they adopted the name Red Raiders. Well, a number of people recently, some of the newer and younger people, the newcomers to the community, thought calling them the Raiders, calling them the Red Raiders to begin with, was sort of treating our Native Americans in a negative fashion. So they dropped the red. They even changed the football uniforms from red jerseys to black. And they just became the Raiders. And that didn't suit a lot of people, especially 6 members of our school board. And after much hassle and so forth, they changed the name to the Ravens. And I noticed the Herald, in writing up Rutland's basketball games, refers to them now as the Ravens. Well, in my opinion, because of the number of people that didn't want a name change, it should have been voted on this town meeting day. There's a decision made by 6 members of the school board, and as I understand it, they had a committee of students at the high school, about 20 of them, and the majority voted to adopt the name Ravens. Well, I think Butch Paul, in the letters to the paper, has made good points. The taxpayers, the people that are paying the bill, should have had a say in that name change. And that's why it should have gone to the voters and been voted on. They wanted to change the name Raiders to Ravens, or whatever else they wanted to call them. The voters of the city of Rutland, who pick up the tab, or the bulk of the tab, for our public schools, should have had the right to vote on that. But that's not going to be done, and the change is made, and I do believe it's official. Now, speaking of budgets, budget is always a big item at every town meeting and every March city election. And the biggest item on the budget is always the school budget. Here in Rutland this year, the school budget is in excess of $50 million. It's almost $58 million. That's an awful lot of money. Now, granted, there's going to be help Rutland City is a receiving town, so money will be coming in from the state. And there are a few other items in there that will cut down the cost. But with a budget of over 57 million and a city budget in excess of 22 million, you're looking at approximately 79, well, almost $80 million in tax money. And I'd say a little bit over 80 when you play in or put in all the various extra things that are going to be over and above the charter limit. So we could be looking at $82, $83 million being voted on Tuesday, March 2nd. Now, by the time many of you see this program on Wednesday and Friday and Sunday, the results will already be in. And we'll know who our city leaders are going to be, whether any of the incumbents have been reelected, and who the new people are going to be. Rutland City, there'll be at least 3 new people on the Board of Aldermen. David Lair is running for another term, and I think he's in pretty good shape. Because when people go to vote, they're either going to vote for Lair or they're going to vote against him. And the vote against him is going to be split 6 ways. And I think if I were one of the candidates challenging the mayor, I'd realize that with that many people in the running, that this probably is not the year to throw your hat in the ring. Just too many opposition votes. And Dave will have a solid block of support, and I do believe that he will be reelected without too much trouble. Now, for those of you that want to watch the earlier returns, channel 1085, that's this channel that we're on, will be carrying your election returns. The veteran moderator or master of ceremonies, or whatever you want to call him, Tom Donahue, will be doing the job again, keeping us up to date, not only on city results, but also the various towns as the results come in. As the town clerks or whoever does that detail calls them in here to PEG TV, and they'll get them up. So probably by 8:30 for sure, we'll know in Rutland City who's going to be on the Board of Aldermen, how the new board's going to be composed, and how much Dave Allaire has been reelected by. And there are also other items on the back. You look down that charitable list, and they're all worthy. Every one of them is worthy. But there may be some you figure, well, we just can't afford it. And the big item now, it's not only so much whether you can afford these taxes, but it's also the economy itself and how long people are going to have jobs and what our taxes are going to be, how many can afford to pay their taxes and how many can't, how many are going to have to make a decision on their mortgage, or on their rent, on their food. And this is going to be a big play and a big factor in how many of the other items are going to be approved. In fact, it's going to be a big factor on the approval of the school budget and the city budget. People take a look at this and say, man, I just don't have that much job security. So a lot of very, very serious consideration. And as I say, this is basic democracy. The people get to make a decision, and it adheres to the definition of democracy, which is government of the people, by the people, for the people. So, if you haven't voted, hopefully you'll be able to get to the polls and vote tomorrow. We never have 100%, but boy, it'd sure be nice if we come close. Granted, the weather's not going to be the best. That's our break, but we'll do the best we can. With that, may Almighty God continue to bless these United States of America. God love you. We'll see you all next week. And stay warm. And stay warm.